Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to be talking about our favorite subject, which is what is the process of selling your childcare business? And just know that this process is a Hinge proprietary process, meaning we made it up, just like you guys made up your own processes based on client demand. We have and continually work with and revise our selling process when there are changes in the market and we notice that our clients need a little extra support in certain areas, we will add in a process step. So just know that this is specific to the Hinge team, and I'm sure Alec will point out to you guys where those are and what our recent additions to the process are and why we added them. So let's jump into our content over here, and thanks for being with us. I would love to introduce to you guys Alec Ligon. Alec has been with Hinge almost 10 years, I think, and Alec leads our processes and our transaction team, which consists of 5 advisors, 2 diligence managers, 3 analysts, and it takes quite a large team to get our clients through what is now a pretty complicated process. So thank you for sharing your knowledge with our friends here, Alec. I will turn it over to you. I'll moderate questions and then jump back in here at the end. So thanks for this information.
Thank you. And Kathy forgot the most important thing is that I'm her son, so I have to be on here and invited to all webinars. But really appreciate you guys joining us today. For any of you who were in attendance the last time I was a part of these webinars, we talked about growing and the buy side process. This is going to be somewhat similar. So as we're talking through what Mom mentioned is our Hinge process that we created that's proprietary to us. Think about it from buy side as well. If you're ever considering growth, or if you may be considering growth down the line, never too early to think about your exit, but also never too early to be thinking about growth if that's something that's on your mind. If for some reason we don't get to a question that you have at any point today, feel free to reach out to us, right? You can find my cell phone number on our website. I'm happy to share, any knowledge that I can give at any point with any of you. So feel free to reach out. We are an open book here at Hinge, and we want to support you guys in every manner that we can. So starting from the beginning, we're going to run through the selling process. Like Mom mentioned, this is proprietary to us. If any of you have ever used advisory firms in the past, brokerage firms, whatever, in acquiring your own schools, it may have looked a little bit different. I'm going to go through the different levels that we have and the reasons behind it. I believe we skipped a page there. You can go back. All right, so it all starts with the initial valuation. Like Mom mentioned previously, we do this for free. And we have a group of financial analysts and advisors that are very familiar with what the buyers in this industry look for. It is, key information revolving around your financials that basically get us to the point of, valuing your business. Typically what we'll produce is a spread value. Like Mom mentioned previously, we don't share that when we go to market. All of our listings are listed without an asking price, but this gives you an idea before you decide whether or not you're ready to exit, if the value is there for you, right? So you would work alongside one of our advisors and our financial analyst team. If you own your own real estate, we do business and real estate valuations. If you don't, that's perfectly fine as well. We provide both and have the ability to sell both. The valuation is customized to current comps, right? So these largely haven't changed in the last couple of years, but we do alter our business multiples, basically what businesses are valued based on, a form of EBITDA, based on what we know, what we see in the industry. It's our experience that allows us to give you the best information that we can as it relates to the value of your business and real estate. Next slide. So the next step, we would obviously run through the valuation with you, assuming that it is something that appeals to you and you are ready to move on to the next step. You'll be assigned an advisor, right? So you would have previously been assigned an advisor, but and this is the person that will quarterback your process moving forward. The next step for them would be to come out and visit your schools, right? So before we can really finalize what that financial picture looks like, and to get a really good grasp of your operation, advisors want to be boots on the ground. They want to see what the operation looks like, and make sure that what you have and what you're operating in is in line with the buyers that we market to. We can tour in any number of ways, right? Confidentiality is extremely important throughout the entire process. We've been everything from a friend in the industry to insurance provider, banker, whatever makes the most sense to you. We're also happy to do these tours after hours or on weekends. We would obviously love to see your operation in all of its glory in the middle of the day, but we understand that that may not always be feasible, and we certainly don't want to disrupt anything as it pertains to your staff and parents. So we can work with you in that respect. The next step for us is negotiating a listing agreement. So this is the contract between you and Hinge that specifies, here's what we do, here's what is expected, and here's what our fee would be. A couple of things to note: Hinge doesn't get paid at any point during the process, right? So every expense, except for obviously third-party expenses like your attorney or your CPA, all other expenses as it relates to the process are Hinge's. We take care of all of that throughout a process, and we don't get paid unless we close for you, right? So we're paid at closing the same as you, and if we don't perform for you, we don't make any money. So that's one thing to be mindful of. A few major points as it pertains to listing agreements to keep in mind. The term, right? We have a 12-month term that we typically like to ask our clients to lock into. It basically just means you work with us for a 12-month period, and if for some reason we're not able to get the deal done for you in that span, obviously we would let you out of the agreement. The other piece are tails. So listing agreement tails involve selling to a buyer brought to you by the listing agent or broker or advisor in our case, within a certain term after determination of the listing agreement. So hypothetical there would be, we brought a buyer who submitted an offer that maybe didn't meet your specifications at the time. You, for whatever reason, terminated our agreement, but decided to sell to them within the next 12 months. We would still be owed our fee. Our tail is a 12-month period. It only pertains to buyers that we bring to you, not anyone else. So keep that in mind if you're ever shopping around for advisory firms or brokerage firms. So a financial review, this is kind of our second valuation step. So we added this relatively recently. I say within the last 2 years, but basically what this does is it's basically a mini audit of your financials. During a process with a buyer, you're going to be asked to go through due diligence, and part of that due diligence is a quality of earnings review. It's extremely important that we have a really good grasp on your financial picture prior to going into that process. So we've added this financial review step. It allows us to give really clean, nice financial picture to the buyer pool that we're marketing with. Its main point is to, one, update the previous valuation we would have done with you before, because very likely a month would have gone by since then. So updating the past valuation, but also making sure we're getting out in front of any potential issues that we might see in a quality of earnings review, and ultimately presenting the financials as clean as we possibly can, right? That's going to serve us extremely well during a process. It's going to speed things up. It's going to make sure that there is no justification for renegotiation of purchase price at any point throughout a process. So this is our mini audit that we've added to our process that again, just essentially cleans up the financial picture prior to going to market. In conjunction with this financial review, we're going to be creating what we call an OM, or offering memorandum. So this is basically the marketing package that includes the financial picture that we just spoke about, but also all the other great things about your operation, right? So we take professional photography of your facilities. We include that in the marketing piece. Really great descriptions of who you are, what makes you special. And basically just gives each buyer that we market to a really good idea of what they're buying, and highlights you in the best possible way we can, right? So we not only want to get the best value for you, but we want to make sure that buyers have a good idea of who you are, so that the fit is there, and they understand it as well as they can prior to going into a process with you. So like Mom mentioned before, we have a tremendous list of buyers that we market to, both strategic, and when we say strategic, we just mean buyers that are currently operating child care centers, and financial buyers. So those would be your private equity firms that are looking to get into the child care sector and acquire their platform operation. Sorry, one quick thing on that before. Just to note, when we do launch our marketing package, or our OM, we ensure that all buyers that we market to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Like I mentioned before, confidentiality is extremely important. We want to make sure you're protected. We want to make sure that they're protected, right? Because they're essentially partnering with you on this deal. And that, when the time comes for the rest of the world to learn of the process, that it's done the right way. So everyone signs non-disclosure agreements. The non-disclosure agreements are what we call blind when they receive them initially. So there's nothing in the agreement that gives them any sort of indication as to who you are until they sign it. And then we send over the offering memorandum. Nope. Indications of interest. So this is another step that we added right around 2020, post-COVID. So all of you have probably heard of LOIs, or letters of intent. This is a step before that we call an indication of interest. So this is like a mini letter of intent stage where we're receiving non-binding offers from the buyers in order to sort of get a good grasp as to value. When you market to 50, 60, 70 plus buyers, the last thing you want to be doing is moving on to a tour phase where you have, a good chunk of those touring your facilities without really getting alignment on value, right? So what this does is allows them to give us an idea as to, all right, we've reviewed your offering memorandum. We've reviewed the financial picture. We think there's some synergy here. We want to make a run at this thing. Here's what we think the value currently is. It's not an offer per se for us to negotiate, but it's just information for you to sit down and say, okay, these are the people that I like. These are the people that are most aligned with me on how we operate, how we do things, and ultimately value, which is obviously extremely important. So this step really just determines that we have alignment on value with the buyers that we're working with, and allows you to choose who moves on to the next step, which is buyer tours. All right, so buyer meeting and school tour. So this is very similar to that advisor tour, right? So most buyers are happy to do it after hours or on weekends. Again, all of them would love to see your operation while it's open and operating. But it's really difficult sometimes to get 5 or 6 buyers in during operation. So a lot of times we'll schedule these after hours or on weekends. It's really just an opportunity, to do something similar to what the advisor did previously, just to get eyes on your facility, get eyes on your operation, and make sure that, what they thought they knew in the IOI is true. On the advisor side for Hinge, we coordinate all of this, right? So we're there for every tour. We make sure everything runs smoothly and try to take off as much of the headache as we can off of you. All right, so here's the LOI, the letter of intent. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this. So this is just like the IOI, but this is actually the official letter of intent that can be negotiated, executed, and then moved into the next step with your winning buyer. Really important that you know what's important to you at this stage. Obviously, value is important, but are we negotiating a lease? Do we need to consider what the lease terms are here? If you do hold your own real estate, what are their plans for your management team, right? Are they considering keeping them? Are they considering getting rid of them? So this is kind of like the first step in really fleshing out the nitty gritty as to the major terms of the agreement. This is the alignment, right? So we want to make sure that all major terms as it relates to this potential process are outlined here so that we start on a really good foot, a good foundation for the process moving forward. We work closely with you to evaluate each one of these. As you might imagine, not all buyers are created equal from a process standpoint. So that's another conversation that goes into this. We can discuss what we like, what we don't like about each buyer. And ultimately, you are the one who select the winner. Again, we would negotiate the letters of intent, not just value, but, the other terms that we mentioned before. And you would ultimately select the winner here. All right. So once we're under a letter of intent, it gets really fun. So 3 things start simultaneously. We had that quality of earnings review that I mentioned before, which is why we run that financial analysis right before launching. And then there's a due diligence portion, which quality of earnings is a portion of that. It's the financial piece to due diligence. And then we're also obviously negotiating legal agreements. So we try to get these things started as early as possible and together so that we're not wasting time. We want to move as quickly as we can, as time kills all deals. Again, like I mentioned before, when we do that mini audit prior to going to market, we really start out on a really good footing for the quality of earnings review. Typically, we'll start on due diligence prior to going under letter of intent with a buyer as well. We have 2 due diligence managers that work together on every deal. You would have a main point of contact, but they really support one another here. And the beautiful thing about what they do is, one, they're very familiar with all the buyers that we work with. They know what they ask for. They know how they want things in order. So this just, you're going to get a due diligence request list from a buyer that makes you want to pull your hair out. It's going to be a lot of information. If they're paying you millions and millions of dollars for your business, they're going to need a lot of information to make sure that they feel comfortable about it in closing. But the beautiful thing is our due diligence team is set up to make this as easy as we possibly can for you. So really what we allow you to do is dump the information on us and allow us to get it in the form and in the format and the in the proper place within the due diligence room. All the due diligence information will be kept in a secure room, whether it be our room in ShareSync. We use ShareSync. It's a safe and secure location so that no one's able to access your confidential information at any point. Or our buyers may have some sort of form that they use that we can also work with. I'll say typically buyers prefer to use ShareSync in what we use. And then the last thing is obviously the legal agreement. So this is kind of the first time that we would really need your attorney to work alongside our advisor and make sure that all of those major terms in the LOI are specified in the listing in the legal agreements. And that we are aligned on everything there. So want to do all of these 3 together. I will say that we don't execute legal agreements until all of due diligence is done and checked off. But we want to make sure that we're not wasting much time in between each one of these. So we try to run them as simultaneous as we can. All right, diligence. So this is that part I mentioned about getting ahead of the game. So this is just a giant list of the buckets that buyers ask for from a due diligence standpoint as it relates to not only your operations and staff information, corporate information, but also your financial picture as well. So at Hinge, we have sample due diligence lists that we can share with you in advance of going to market so that you make sure you're collecting all of this information. And that, or at least that you're able to collect it relatively easily once we get there, right? So, having this over a long period of time is not necessarily needed. You wouldn't necessarily need enrollment from 10 years ago, but just understanding and being able to go back and get it if needed relatively easily is super important. So if you're ever interested in seeing that sample due diligence list, it's not as robust as the actual buyer diligence list that you're going to get, but it at least lays a really good framework for you to get a start on ensuring that you're able to pull this information when the time comes. The next slide. All right, these are the legal agreements. Again, I'll kind of run through this quickly. They're drafted by the buyer, right? So we're going to get the initial draft from whomever the buyer is, and then we go back and forth negotiating until we can come to an agreement. Typically, I recommend only doing about 1 or 2 red line passes before we just have an all hands call that includes attorneys. It's typically easier to talk through these negotiation points rather than just send marked up legal agreements across one another. So again, we try to do this in conjunction with due diligence as to not waste time here. And again, this is the point in time where we really work closely with your attorney to make sure you're protected. Couple of different legal agreements to consider. So there's an asset purchase agreement. This is the typical business purchase agreement that we see where they're buying your assets, the assets of the school, goodwill, FF&E, all that good stuff. Stock purchase agreement. So sometimes buyers will be open to running stock deals. Typically, we see that so they can avoid state licensing or relicensing. There are a few other reasons, but most prefer asset deals. So those are the 2 types of business purchase agreements that you'll typically see. And then we have PSAs, which is the real estate purchase agreement. This only applies to you if you are the owner of your real estate and selling your real estate. If you are not selling your real estate, we may be negotiating a new lease, right? So really like this for my clients, especially with the buyer pool that we market to, who are typically very well credited national operators. Having them as a tenant or considering that, being their landlord moving forward is typically a pretty good gig. We negotiate true triple net leases. Typically the initial terms are 15 years with options, 2.5% escalators. Again, it's a pretty good gig. So if you hold your own real estate, I would certainly consider staying on as landlord. And we're happy to assist in negotiating lease agreements as well. All right, buyer licensing. So we just hit on this a little bit. Every state is different. All of you have dealt with licensing. You probably have a much better idea as to what that looks like in your particular state than I do. But assuming, again, every state is different. But assuming that the buyer does have to relicense, they would at some point, once we've checked the boxes of due diligence and purchase agreements have been negotiated and likely executed, they would loop in state licensing to figure out, what that timeline looks like. Okay, do we have a notification period that we have to give parents and staff? What are the forms that have to be submitted? We obviously would work alongside them in order to make sure that their application is complete and accurate, as to not waste time. It's typically good to be talking about this in advance of going to licensing, but just know, you want to get to a point in the deal where due diligence, quality of earnings, and the agreements have been negotiated fully before you loop in licensing. This is one of those areas where we don't have control over confidentiality, right? Once you loop in licensing, they're not going to sign a non-disclosure agreement. They could, in theory, tell anyone they wanted to. I can tell you at Hinge, we've never had an issue with that. And I don't really have any reason to think that you would either. But just know that, you want to have a lot of those boxes checked prior to looping in licensing. All right. So in conjunction with, opening things up to licensing, you typically need to be talking about what that announcement to parents and staff look like. It kind of varies by buyer, what they prefer, but I will say that most of them do a really nice job of working with our clients in determining something that makes sense for both sides. Typically, this happens between 1 and 4 weeks prior to close. I'll say 4 weeks is a little bit on the long end. I typically don't like anything more than about 2 weeks. I think that's plenty of time. We'll talk about this during the process, but it's super important that this happen together, so that it looks like a true partnership between buyer and seller. Typically what happens is you will loop in your management staff. That's typically anyone director and above, a few days prior to looping in the rest of the team. And again, this may be different for you if your team is different. And we certainly have those conversations, but typically you would loop in that management team, a couple of days in advance of the rest of the staff, whether that be taking them to dinner, whatever it is, whatever makes the most sense for you. And the reason we like to do that is we like to get them on board with the process. We like to have them feel part of it. A lot of times we see that if they learn at the same time as other staff members, they feel a little yucky, like maybe, you should have told them before everyone else. And when the rest of the staff has questions about the process or about this new buyer, they'll sometimes go to them instead of you, right? So it's really good to have that management team on your side and a part of the conversation a little bit in advance of telling everyone else. When you go to tell everyone else, typically it's done with the buyer, right? So you'll schedule, typically what we'll see is you'll schedule a staff meeting like you always do on a Monday or Tuesday, whatever makes the most sense. And you'll announce to everyone at that meeting in person that the sale is happening. You'll explain the reasons typically behind your exit, whether that be for retirement or, whatever. And then you'll introduce the new buyer, right? It's really, really important that they be there and part of this because, again, you want to make it feel like this is a partnership. It's going to make your staff feel a lot better about the process and about their future with the group. I will say that the buyers that we market to all want to keep all of your staff, right? That's their number one goal, is to keep every staff member that's in the schools. They know that that's the secret sauce. That's why your parents are there. That's why your parents love you, right? That's why the kids love you. It's because of your staff, right? So as much as they can, they want to keep all of your staff. The other thing that obviously they're going to ask is my pay changing? So the answer there for almost pretty much every buyer that we work with is that it will either stay the same or get better, right? So they're either going to raise or they're going to keep it the same. The other thing to keep in mind is that most of the buyers that we market to will bring a better benefits package to your staff. They'll also bring more opportunity for your staff to grow into a different role, right? So some areas where we've seen this is, obviously going from teacher to assistant director to regional, so on and so forth. We've seen that quite often. So they just have a much bigger family or network that they're able to grow into then, right? So it's going to be emotional. None of them want to see you go. They're going to be sad. And if they aren't sad, then you probably should have sold a long time ago, right? But there is some benefit to them, right? They do have opportunities that maybe weren't there for, when you were operating. And chances are they're going to be taken care of a little bit more from a benefit standpoint or from a pay standpoint. It's extremely important to be very transparent and positive, right? Again, this is a partnership between you and the buyer. And the transition is extremely important to everyone. All right, and then closing. Unfortunately, this is I say this to clients all the time. It's so unceremonial. Like, it happens via wire. It typically happens on a Friday. We're not all around, a conference room table popping champagne bottles. I wish that was what it was. But it typically occurs, either the Friday after you announce or 2 Fridays after you announce, if you have a 2-week window between announcement and close. And again, it's done via wire. It'll just hit your bank account, typically in the afternoon. On a Friday, we like to close on Fridays because we like to make it easy from a true up standpoint, from a bill standpoint, an expense standpoint, so that it's much easier to say later on that this was on your time, and moving forward from Monday on was on their time from an expense standpoint. I just went over that extremely quickly, so happy to answer any questions that you might have. But these next 2 slides that I'm going to go over are probably, in my opinion, the most important slides of the conversation. These are lessons that we've learned from the process. Things are constantly changing in this industry and within the process. So these are just sort of some high level things to learn. So if that was boring to you, our process, I apologize, but please pay attention to this because I really do think it could help you. So When you're going to sell, obviously, the way to look at your financial picture and your business picture, the first thing to do is to uncover all expenses, right? So identify every potential personal expense within the business that may have not been factored into the valuation, right? So, sometimes this can be a capital expense. You put a new roof on the building, you put new AC units in, whatever, or you're just running family trips through your business. That's not uncommon. And, we're not the IRS. Our buyers don't care about it. As long as we can substantiate the expense and show them this is a personal expense, they will give you credit for it, right? And if we don't ask for it, you're not going to give credit. So making sure you're uncovering all of these personal expenses or capital expenses that are one-time expenses is super important to make sure that you're getting all the benefit of what your financial picture actually looks like. The valuation insight. So leverage us, right? For accuracy. Like, we know the things to look out for. Like Mom mentioned earlier, we do these valuations for free. So please use us if you can. I will say that there are certain criteria that buyers that we work with have to meet. Usually it's from a size standpoint and an EBITDA standpoint. So we don't do free valuations for everyone, but people who meet that threshold, we certainly can. And I'm happy to discuss, whether or not that's an option for you outside of this meeting. The seller's role. So think about this. Your current role within your operation, is that something that will need to be replaced by the new operator, or are you expendable, right? Like, ideally, you're extremely expendable. I tell clients all the time, work your way out of a job to where, you're not really having to go into the center very often, or, those remedial tasks that you feel like, should be director tasks are actually being done by the director. Some of you are the director, and that's perfectly fine. It just means that we wouldn't be able to justify adding back your salary without also including a director salary to move in. Financial liability. So this is a big one. Paid time off for your staff. This is looked at as a debt to your business, right? So this is time off that they've accrued while being your employee, right? So when you go to the closing table, you have to pay off any outstanding debt. An easy way to get out in front of this is to stop allowing staff, if you do currently, to roll over PTO hours, right? Get it all in by the end of the year, or you lose it. That way you don't get to the sales process and realize, oh man, I've got to pay out 400 hours of PTO. Revenue optimization. So explore opportunities for post-closing adjustment to parent discount. So we try to coach our clients, well in advance of going to market to cut discounts as much as they possibly can, right? It's sort of just something that we've seen largely go away in the industry. That doesn't mean staff discounts, right? Staffing's hard enough. You want to make sure you're taking care of your teachers. Whatever you're doing for staff, keep doing it. But those parent discounts, half off for a sibling, free third child, whatever that might be, consider getting rid of those as new enrollees come in, right? You can grandfather your current parent and children into the old discount, but really consider getting rid of those moving forward before you go to market. You'll see the effect that it actually has on your valuation. And again, we found that most parents don't expect it anymore. So strongly consider doing that. And then enrollment and pricing. If you're sitting there thinking, we haven't raised tuition rates in 2 years, do it, right? I mean, and again, we're happy to help. If you're waitlisted, I don't care what you're charging, you're not charging enough, right? I had a kid in the middle of COVID, and it took us 9 months to get him into childcare. I would have paid triple what they charged me, right? There are people out there who are looking to get their children into your center. If you're waitlisted, you're not charging enough. I mean, the day that comes, and this is very harsh for me to say, but I'm saying it as a parent of 2 kids that are in childcare currently. If you have parents that are out there that want to get in, you got to, it's basic supply and demand principles, right? Until there's a day where you have a parent leave because your tuition rates are too high and you don't have a replacement for them, I don't think you're charging enough. Hopefully that doesn't turn all of you off, because I know I'm not the one that's having to talk to these parents, but I want what's best for you. I want the most value for you because you deserve it. And that's the way to look at it, in my opinion. All right, continuing through the lessons learned. So historical trends, this is part of what we do with you. We analyze the history of your tuition rate increases, the frequency, the timing, the percentage. New buyers are going to be interested in this because they're going to probably try to do the same thing that you did. If there's a time of year that you're typically raising rates, keep up with it. If it's ad hoc, that's okay too. But we need to explain, what it is that, how you do it. Is it just, based on the year, based on the economy, timing of years at the beginning of school? Is it, starting at the beginning of summer? At what point do you notify parents of the increase? So try to get some consistency there if you can. But certainly it's okay if you don't have that. Operational needs. So are there any maintenance issues, right? Like we talked about this before. Is your roof coming up? Is your roof 20 years old? Is your AC unit 15 years old? Are there things, small things that you can do to and that those aren't small things, but is the parking lot in need of caulking, or are there cracks everywhere and you need to fill them? Those things can make a big difference once you get into a process. Maybe not a huge difference, but they kind of add up, right? So consider any of that CapEx, that you may have thought about. Oh, I really love to do this. Consider doing it before you exit. Reputation management. So online reviews are a big deal, right? Buyers are serious about this. They really want to know, what your reputation is in your market, right? So if you have a good one, great, continue doing what you're doing. If you have a so-so one, maybe incentivize your parents into leaving a good review, right? Give them $100 off, tuition for a month, or whatever it is, to leave a good review. It's a big deal. It's one of the first things that at least the operations team from these buyer bases look at when they're assessing your schools. And then vendor agreements. Wow, this is a big one too. So you can't assume that any third party agreement is going to transfer, or buyer will want it to transfer to them, right? The biggest thing that we see sellers get tripped up on are copier leases, right? So if you've got 20 years left on your copier lease, chances are buyer's not assuming that lease, and you're going to have to pay out the rest of it. There's some small things like your local trash service, or they'll probably keep your maintenance man or your yard guy, or whatever. But really consider what those third party contracts look like, and what you're required to do throughout the remaining term, and how long that term is. If you're getting to a point where, maybe your copier lease is coming up, see if you can negotiate a year to year moving forward, right? That's the ideal situation, is that all of these agreements would be year to year, so that you're not having to pay out a tremendous amount when you go to the closing table. And then insurance, right? So assess current insurance coverage and structure the deal to mitigate potential liability. I think that kind of explains itself. I think that is the end for me. We have some questions.
We do have some questions, really good ones. Thank you, Alec, for that. Okay, let's tackle some. What time frame of historical information does the due diligence window cover? Great question, Todd.
Yeah, really good question. So typically 3 years, right? Some will ask for more. If it kind of is sort of dependent on how the age of your business too, right? They're typically not going to ask for anything more than that, though. So I would say somewhere between 3 and 5 years.
Also, how does Hinge address franchise schools?
Oh, really good question. So, yeah, great question, Todd. So, at Hinge, we don't sell within franchises. We're just not a good partner for you on that, as we don't have a large pool of franchisees to market to, and the operators that we market to typically will not operate within a franchise agreement. So the only time we're able to partner with franchisees is when they're coming up on the end of their agreement. That kind of goes back to your third party contracts, right? You need to really understand, if you want to sell outside, which I will say you're almost always advantaged selling outside of your franchise than inside. The buyers that the strategics that we market to are going to pay much higher business multiples, and you're going to be able to add back all of those franchise fees. So consider that if it's an option. But really getting a good grasp on, the term that's left on your franchise agreement, you're going to have to pay out those royalties anyway. So, I would highly recommend not going to market in year 10 or, with 10 years left on your franchise agreement. Typically, the way that we see it is people start thinking about it at about 2 years left on your franchise agreement. So you're going to have to pay that out, but know your rights in your agreement. Know what the franchisor's rights are. Typically, they have a right of first refusal that they either have to waive at LOI or act upon at LOI. So getting a good grasp of that if you do decide you want to sell outside of the franchise. But again, if you're looking for a sale within the franchise, I would go to your franchisor first and foremost. They probably have an extensive list of franchisees that are looking to get in, and go about it that way if you have to sell inside. But I would strongly suggest selling outside if that's at all possible, because it's going to give you a lot more value.
Yeah, Robert asked what about franchise agreements, but I imagine Alec just answered that. But if not, pop us another question in there, Robert. Let us know what specifically about the franchise agreements you wonder about, just if we didn't answer it fully. Do you normally see 80% up front and the rest held back for a period of time? Or what is the best negotiated value to expect at closing? Great question from Jim.
Yeah, so it's all very dependent on your current business valuation, right? So ideally, you're receiving 100% cash at closing, right? And I would say that's the vast majority of deals that we take to market are 100% cash at closing. I think what you're referencing are what we typically call earnouts, right? So if you can justify an earnout, typically that comes in the form of you've opened up a new school within the last year and it hasn't quite ramped up, but we want to get you value for any enrollments moving forward. Or you saw a downtick in the previous 12 months in enrollment at this location, but you can show historically that it's done much better. And it's starting to do better. We want to get you that value that may not be there at close, but it will be in the future. So the buyers that we market to are certainly open to doing that. But ideally, it's 100% all cash at closing if you can justify it.
Alec, could you also speak to holdbacks?
Sure. Yeah. So holdback is it's an indemnification piece, at least in the buyers that we work with. It's typically 5% of the business value or less if we can. And usually that's pretty easy to negotiate, but it's typically 5% or less of the total business value. Is held back for a 12-month period. And it's just for buyer to make sure that everything we told them in that due diligence process is accurate. The financial picture that we gave them in quality of earnings review is accurate. And they want a 12-month period because they want to see every month after it's theirs, to make sure that everything was fair and accurate. I can say at Hinge, I've never had a client that didn't receive 100% of their holdback after a year. So, and I don't know of any of our advisors that have either. And part of that is due to the fact that we do so much homework up front to make sure that all the information that we're giving them is accurate.
Yeah, in your example, Jeremy, 20% would have been the holdback if that's your reference. And we do have buyers sometimes ask for a lot of money to be held back, but we negotiate hard on that because that's not industry standard. Alec, you mentioned that buyers can bring better benefits to staff. Can you explain that?
Sure. This is probably going to be a large company that you're selling to, right? So whether you're talking about 401k, health benefits, dental, all of these things are potentially options for your staff moving forward. They may all be things that you offer to them already, and that's great if you do. They offer it to them as well. But chances are there's something within their benefits package that is more than what you're currently offering your staff, and they immediately have access to that benefit from day one. And I'll also say that the buyers that we market to look at your staff's hire date for you as their hire date for them, right? So if you hired them 10 plus years ago, as it relates to their benefits package and their salary increases moving forward, they will look at your hire date as their hire date. So their tenure remains once you transfer over to the new operator, which is really great for your staff.
Alec, I'm going to combine two questions into one. So we have a guest who has 5 locations, but one of them is small. It's licensed for 99. It's enrolled with 50 children. Is this center too small for Hinge to work with? And then add on to that, if someone does want to reach out to see if this would be a good path for them, how do they do that?
Yeah. So to answer the first question, on its own, yes, that would be too small for us at Hinge. As a package of 5, maybe not, right? And I think we would have to dig into the total operation first and foremost to determine whether or not we felt like we're a good fit for you as an advisor and our buyer base would be interested. The last thing we want to do is waste your time, right? So we don't want to pretend to be something that we're not, and that our buyer base is going to be interested in something that it potentially wouldn't be. So as a one-off, 99 capacity is not large enough, but maybe 99 capacity is as it relates to a group of 5 schools. I'm sorry, I totally forgot what your name was.
How can they reach out if they
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I can give you my cell number right now. It's 864-554-4123. Again, that's 864-554-4123. You'll also see throughout our website, there are a couple of different numbers to call. They all come to me. So you're going to reach me either way, even though it may not actually be that number. So you can go to our website and look up our selling process and our selling offering to you. And I believe there's a cell phone number there. You can also fill out an inquiry form. So that comes straight to Kim, who does some research for us and then sends it to me. And that's done on our website as well. So if you'd like for me to reach out to you, go online, check out hingeadvisors.com, our selling process and selling offerings, and fill out that inquiry form, and I'll get back to you.
Yeah, Kim, pop Alec's cell number in the Q&A. That would be good. Alec, do you see interest in the buyer pool for specific pedagogies such as Montessori programs?
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, another good question. It's obviously not going to be everyone's cup of tea. Not all of the national operators operate in those types of programs, but for those that do, there's absolutely an interest in growing in those, Montessori specifically, and Reggio. The other that we've seen recently is language immersion. That's a huge piece that a lot of the buyers that we market to are looking to grow in. So to answer your question, there's tremendous interest. It's not going to be from everyone, but there is a pool of buyer that is interested in growing in those areas.
Also, do buyers typically offer top price for the real estate? Talk a little bit about options there.
Yeah, so another really good question. So most of the business buyers that we work with do not hold their own real estate. So if you own your real estate and your business, and we took that to market for you, chances are what they would do was partner with a REIT. Real estate investment trust team, whatever you want to call it, but it's basically these big firms that invest in real estate. The reason that they partner with them is they're probably their landlord in a bunch of different locations nationwide. The beautiful thing for you is when they do this, both of these processes run simultaneous to one another. So it feels like one sales process, even though you're selling to 2 different entities, one business entity to the business operator and the real estate entity to the real estate operator, or REIT in this case. To answer your question, yes, they do offer top price for the real estate, and it's because of the tenant that we just brought them, right? So we brought them a nationally accredited tenant with many, many schools nationwide who they've partnered with in the past. They're going to get a better cap rate than you do, right? If you were to reach out to a REIT and say, I have 2 schools that I want to sell, what's the best rate you can give me? So you're advantaged in that respect with the business buyer as the new tenant.
Okay, so Alec, we have a guest who has multiple schools. Do they all have to be sold? They have 7 schools.
Yeah, so the answer is no, but I will say, you're probably advantaged from a valuation standpoint in including all of them together, right? So business values are based almost entirely on EBITDA, right? Or your net cash flow. That is your bottom line plus your personal add backs. The more you add, the higher your business multiple gets, right? So I imagine selling 7 schools, your EBITDA is going to be higher than selling 2 or selling 3. So you're probably advantaged in that respect, because as your business multiple gets greater, your value per dollar is just being multiplied that many more times, right? So where you may be a 4 times with 2 sites, you might be a 6 times with 7 sites, right? So think about it that way. Let us just run a valuation for you, right? And I can tell you, definitively whether or not I think it makes sense. Again, we do it free of charge. We don't, it doesn't bind you into working with us in any way. And I think that's probably the better route to go to make sure that we're advising you as best we can.
All right, 2 more. Let's see if we can squeeze them in 2 minutes. If I have a potential buyer for the business, but need a buyer for the property, is that something you can help with?
Maybe. So, I would say just give us a call and let me know. We can keep it relatively confidential, and I'm happy to answer that question for you without requiring that you sign anything for us.
And then lastly, what are your fees?
Yeah, so industry norms, and this is based entirely on your total value, right? So the more valuable you are, the lower our fee is going to be. But I'll say industry norms are typically for business transactions anywhere between 6 and 10%, and then real estate transactions anywhere from 4 to 8%. And that's a piece of gross value. And remember, we're only paid if we close for you, right? So we get paid at the same time you do, and there's no expenses for marketing or anything like that through a process. So to answer that again, business side fees are typically between 6 and 10%. The more valuable you are, the lower that's going to be. The less valuable you are, the higher that's going to be. And then the same thing for real estate, but that's between 4 and 8%.
All right. Well, that was a lot of talking to do and question answering in that last 15 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Kim has dropped Alec's cell number into the chat. Certainly pick that up. We would love to hear from you guys. We'd love for you to get connected to our community, whether you're at a place where a process is something you're considering now. We recommend that you get to know the process and be in the mode where you could act at all times. It really drives the health of your company if you behave as if you are prepared at all times, and that you're constantly thinking about your benchmarking and your financial modeling, which is also something that the team at Hinge supports with. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you, Alec, for that presentation. We hope that you'll connect again, and take care and be well, friends.